Welcome everyone to today's webinar when we'll be talking on digital auditing, digital risk. So today what we'll do, we'll go through some definitions first, then we'll have a look at several different digital risks. And then towards the end of the session, I will share with you a specific step-by-step audit program that I have used in the past for auditing one of the digital risks, and also I will show you a demo of a system which is used for detecting synthetic identity fraud. Some of you I've noticed already know the system. Welcome to the session, Jeff. But for the rest of you, it will be something which probably will give you some ideas on what you will be able to do in your work and in your organizations. So without further ado, let's kick off. First, a couple of definitions, because there is a lot of confusion when we talk and consider digital technology, digital risks, and all of the associated areas linked to those. So first, digitization. So digitization is the process of changing from analog to digital form. Essentially, when you take a paper document, when you scan it and put it into your document management system, this is digitization. It is the first step towards digital transformation and towards the more complex processes. So when we talk about digitalization, just keep that in mind. Converting from analog to digital. Scan your family photos and put them on Dropbox. This is an example of digitalization. Scan all of the vendor invoices that you have accumulated over the years, which are in paper form. Some industries still use paper quite extensively. Scan all of these invoices, put them into your document management system. This is digitalization. Now, the next step, once we've done that, is the digitalization. And here, we're looking at having a business model and looking at new revenue opportunities. We're looking at improving our current processes and making the organization or our teams more effective and efficient. So essentially, this is a process of moving on to digital business. If I continue my analogy with the paper invoices, once you've scanned your paper invoices and once you put them into your document management system, there is very little you can do with them. So this is digitalization. Digitalization is when you create a process, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be like, for example, scanning those and using OCR, optical character recognition, to extract some of the information on those invoices and do something like that. For example, when you have the 20 paper invoices that you have received in July 2020, in order to get the total of the spend across all your vendors, you need to manually basically write down or enter the numbers into Excel and then sum them up. With digitalization, you can actually do that on the documents or the information that is digitalized and which is sitting in your systems. So this is digitalization. Now, digitalization means that we're having a new way of doing things as opposed to just doing things in manually as we were doing it before. So very big difference in the two, although they're very similarly sounding, digitization versus digitalization, but the difference between the two is night and day. Now, with digitalization, we are actually on the way of really becoming a digitally transformed organization, and this is very important for everyone to keep in mind. Now, which leads us to digital risk management, because the more digitalized we are, the greater the risks that we need to be dealing with in various shapes and forms. Now, digital risk, looking at the McKinsey and Co. Definition, digital risk management is a term encompassing all digital enablements that improve risk effectiveness and efficiency, particularly things like process automation, decision automation, digitalized monitoring and early warning. These are all of things that we'll talk a little bit more afterwards, because we want actually to get on top of things. Now, we're talking about digital technology here. We're talking about processes that are automated, and in order to monitor them and to provide proper risk management, we also need to look at automation of the digital risk management. We also are looking at increasing amounts of information which are going through the systems, especially now in the time of COVID and post-pandemic, when the rise of the use of digital technology has gone through the roof. So all of these things require a new approach. So looking at digital risk, we need to apply digital approaches as well. And again, according to McKinsey, there are a number of factors that are part of digital risk management that we need to keep in mind when looking at what we can do with digital risk management. So we should be looking at processes that come from those processes, the analytics that we can perform on that data, because quite often, and I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with these situations in your own organization, is when we have a lot of data, but we do not analyze it as well as we could. There is a number of reasons for that. Usually some of them are technical, some of them are political, some of them are cultural, difficult to say, but in general, organizations do not analyze their data as well as they can. Also, looking at the overall organizational environment, and particular talent and culture. Now, not all people are extremely happy to deal with digital transformation, with digital risk, or with digital technology in general. And we need to keep that in mind, because not everybody is interested in these things. The issue is that you don't need to be, we're more and more surrounded by digital technology in our work, and that trend will keep growing. And you don't need to be an expert in digital technology in order to actually start making use of the opportunities that digital technology provides. So we need to look at all of these things, and we need to actually get our employees and showing them that there are some great opportunities which require very little effort in relation to technology that they can take advantage of. So this is where talent and culture come in. So if the culture changes and we actually start looking at different applications of digital technology in digital risk management, specifically here, if we start actually training people and explaining to them what things can be done in an easier way, eventually they'll come on board. But that would also require time. So keep in mind that when we talk about digital risk management, we all have to get all of these things and put them together to work. Talent and culture are probably one of the main ones that process. So just quickly, to get an idea, you are all familiar with some of the digital risks that are facing your organization. Just using the chat box, just enter one of the numbers, 1 to 6, but out here, which ones are the biggest? Which ones? Sorry, digital
Mario.
risks.
Mario.
Yes.
Sorry, someone is not on mute, and there's a lot of background noise happening that we cannot hear you properly.
Yes. Okay. Let me just. Yes. No, I can hear that. Can I please ask everyone to mute their mics? I will, let's have a look. So it seems to me that okay, looks like we are good now. So please put your mics on mute if you haven't done that already. And yes, looking at these 6 risks here, just enter a number between 1 and 6 so that we can get an idea who is what are the main challenges in your organizations. So just a number between 1 and 6. We have a few answers now. Okay, well, some interesting statistics here. Seems like the new technologies, most people consider to be the biggest one. And then number 2 is cybersecurity. Yeah, absolutely. I can see Larson saying all of the above. Definitely all of the above are a concern in the current environment, and they will actually keep going like that. But I just wanted to get an idea about the biggest one. And actually, this agrees with my personal discussions with people, both here in Australia and over Zoom, overseas. The new things like big data, AI specifically, which are going more and more into the organizational processes, are certainly becoming an issue for the organizations. And one of the main problems is that people do not understand them really well, especially when the initiative comes from a different part of an organization, and then eventually audit or risk management needs to deal with it and also to audit it. And when there is not enough understanding of what the risks are, what the actual technology does, and what the potential risks are, so that creates certainly an issue. I know that a lot of organizations are having that issue. I was contacted last year by one of the biggest banks in India, asking me about our auditing digital risk course, because actually they realized that it was from the internal audit department, they realized that that's something that they need to pay close attention to, because the environment is changing. It started changing before COVID-19, But during COVID-19, it changed dramatically because while we were all locked down at home, not being able to go anywhere, we still were able to actually make purchases over the internet, make money transfers over the internet, perform various types of transactions over the internet. So actually, for that bank, and not just for it, probably for any bank, for every bank in the world, things have come to the surface that they need to start audit, internal audit specifically needs to start doing something more in order to deal with that. So it is a concern for all of us. And then what I see here is consistent with what I see in other places around the world. So I would like to talk here about something important because personally, I like to look at the risks, the digital risks, as internal versus external. Quite often they are lumped together and there is nothing wrong with that, but when I split them into two, it actually gives me a better idea where to focus first because the approach is slightly different. But think about a fortress that is being attacked by an army. The fortress is your organization. The army that's attacking it are various malicious actors, cyber criminals, hackers, and so on, customers. And when I say customers, I mean customers who don't know what to do. So we can classify them as malicious actor. Yes, it's unintentional, but nevertheless, the potential for damage is there. So this is one side of the things, but we are protected by our walls or firewalls, talking about virtual worlds. So we are inside the castle, so we are protected to some extent. But the internal risks from people who are inside the castle actually are much higher because they are already behind the wall. And as a result, intentionally or unintentionally, they can do a lot more damage to the organization. That's why if you read interviews with social engineers and with hackers like Kevin Mitnick is one of them, but there's a number of others, they all say one thing, that's the purpose of the social engineer. Nobody wants to go and penetrate an organization using brute force attack. It's too hard, takes a long time, it can be too expensive in some cases. That's what a social engineer does. They want to gain the trust of somebody inside the organization and penetrate the defenses from the inside. It's as simple as that. So the internal risks actually are much more critical to address than the external ones. External ones definitely are there's no question about it. But do not forget the internal ones. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. So internal versus external risks. So some of the risks that we'll be talking about, internal risks, I'll cover in a little bit more detail shortly. Some of the external risks, excuse me, digital disruption risks. All right, your competitors or your customers are not sitting in one spot. They are changing their processes, they are changing the way they do business, and they are changing the way they interact with you. If you are a private organization like a bank, all of the other banks plus a lot of startups are actually looking at a way to take advantage of this new environment and to take business away from you. Because some of them can perform only one specific function, but they can do it better than. It can be money transfers. It can be foreign exchange. Like I do use Wise and Western Union to transfer money. And I will never use my bank to do that. Simply because the costs are 1/10. And on top of that, the speed with which the money goes to the other party is just lightning speed compared to what the bank does. Western Union, you can transfer the money, or Wise is the same, and within 15-20 minutes, the money is on the other side of the world. With my bank, it takes 3 to 5 days. to perform a SWIFT transfer. Guess which one I'm going to use? So this is just an example, but there's a lot of other things that small, nimble companies are actually looking at doing, and they are doing it quite successfully. That's why so many startups have entered the fintech area. So digital disruption is one that we need to keep in mind. The other one, online credit application risks. Now, this is specifically for banks. So online credit applications are going to increase. I've talked to banks in Australia and to banks overseas when I was traveling before and running training. And all banks are looking at actually beefing up their online credit application function. And makes perfect sense from a business perspective. You can actually be writing credit 24/7. You don't need to stick to business hours, Monday, Friday, 9 to 5. People can be applying for credit all the time, and you can be approving them. Of course, that brings the risk of the approval process. How do you handle that? How do you check the applicant, and so on and so on. So actually the controls which are present in standard loan approval are not here anymore. So it needs to be done in quite a different way. And that creates a risk on itself. Very different banks handle it in different ways. And for some of the banks, these are new situations because they haven't paid attention to these things or great attention to these things before. So actually they need to adjust now. Fraudulent identity theft risks. How do you know that the person on the other side, even if it's face-to-face, how do you know that Mario is Mario? Okay. These days, for example, in Australia, there is a system which exists where you provide a certain number of documents, one of them being a passport or driver's license, because in Australia there is no need to have a passport unless you travel overseas. Driver's license is probably the main form of ID for most people here. Now, you can go and buy from criminal gangs driver's licenses for $500. Everything's there, everything's wrong except your face, and then you can go with that driver's license into any bank and try to open an account, or any government office for that matter, and open an account. So this is another issue. Yes, most countries, like I'm originally from Bulgaria, there's a uniform identifier. Every citizen of the country has got a unique ID assigned to them, and there's a lot of countries which are like that. But nevertheless, even those systems are not 100% proof, and fraud and identity theft do exist there. Cloud-related risks. All right, so cloud is showing a great promise, and a lot of organizations are going to use it more and more, but it brings some risks with it, which we'll discuss shortly, that we need to be mindful of. Data governance and privacy. Again, we are storing more and more data for more and more people as an organization. So what are we going to do with these data items? We need to manage them properly, because otherwise the legislation in a lot of countries can be quite severe in terms of financial penalties. And actually, in some countries, UK was one of those a few years ago. It actually also can bring criminal penalties, which means that actually directors or employees of the bank can go to jail if the process is not implemented properly. Compliance risks. Privacy laws are just one thing that organizations need to comply with, but there is a number of other legislation that organizations need to take into account. So now we need to know what do we need to comply with? Is it just to our national legislation? I was talking to a shipping company in Malaysia a couple of years ago, and they told me one of the problems is that we actually need to comply with a number of different legislations around the world. It's not just the Malaysian ones. We actually need to comply with everything else where we work. And that's an issue. If you are a mining company, it is the same thing, or oil company, it is the same thing. So you have operations in different organizations, like Petronas, I know, operates in Indonesia and in Nigeria, and probably in a lot of other countries in addition to Malaysia. So the legislation applicable to mining, to health and safety, and so on is something that the company needs to comply with. How do you actually manage that process? Business resiliency. Okay, the good old business continuity planning. Okay, how resilient are we? Okay, when COVID hit and we had to send people home because of lockdowns and other things, how easy it was for the organization. You can ask yourself how easy it was for your organization to switch to work from home environment. For some organizations, it was very easy. For some other organizations, it wasn't that easy. There were technical problems, there were cultural problems, you name it. Not everybody was actually very comfortable using Zoom. There were a lot of people who've never touched Zoom before. And I was having an appointment with a doctor for my father, and it took us 5 minutes to set up Zoom for him to actually start providing the consultation. So all of these things, all of these are risks, because all of these things, every single occurrence like that actually introduces inefficiencies in the process, which ultimately cost money to the dynamic workforce risks. All right, very applicable in the current day and age. Now, how do we manage people at home? What sort of infrastructure do we need to provide them with? And how do we prevent them? I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. How do we prevent them from becoming an entry point into our internal systems? Not on purpose, but just by mistake. And now, if organizations, in my opinion, if organizations think that we're going to go back to what it was in 2019, I think most places are kidding themselves. People know that it's possible to work from home and it's not the end of the world. And actually, I know of organizations in Australia and outside Australia which are starting to use the flexibility as a competitive advantage when hiring people. Because if they want to get somebody they know is a good employee, a good expert, an expert in the area and so on, they can offer them the flexibility. And if the other employer cannot offer the same thing or is not willing to offer the same thing, which happens as well, then guess where that expert will go? They will go to the organization which is more flexible in relation to working arrangements. So the dynamic workforce trend has only started. In Malaysia, I know that there were some organizations where the CEO, I forgot which financial service organization, the CEO was very keen on work from home, and it was something that they were looking at continuing post-pandemic. Also, organizations that are using expats from Australia, from Europe, from the Middle East, people who are now accustomed to their flexibility, in order to actually bring them to work for the organization, need to take that into account. I know I read an article recently that European banks are starting to compete with the American banks on talent exactly by offering the work from home or remote work arrangements. Okay, so somebody can go to Bali, sit on the beach, and if they do the work, European banks are happy, they don't care. And the American banks, some of them were basically not, if you can go to a restaurant, you can come to the office. That was one of the expressions by the CEO. Every organization is different, but organizations will need to deal with dynamic workforces in some shape or form. And then the cybersecurity risks. These are not new. They just become a little bit more front of mind for many people, because up until 2019, we kind of knew, but people outside the industry didn't bother too much. Now everybody thinks and talks about it. I am part of an organization called ISACA, and I know there is some people here like Jeff who are also there, and probably some others that I don't know personally. Now, we've been talking about cybersecurity for the last 10 years, and nobody listened to ISACA or to any other industry bodies in addition to ISACA. Now, cybersecurity is front of mind, and it's getting better and better, but at the same time, the criminals are not sitting there are not standing there, they're actually moving as well. So environment is becoming more sophisticated and different. So these are some of the risks in common. Now, looking specifically at the internal environment, those of you who work in IS Audit, for them, this probably is a familiar picture. For those of you who are not, here's an idea about how to look and where to start looking for some of the internal risks. Now, in your organization, you have a number of data centers containing various types of servers. Each one of these pieces of hardware has got an operating system sitting on top of it. So this is where the first risk is. That operating system that contains a number of databases which store the information from your system. So there is a database that contains the information on your customers. There is a database that contains the information on your employees. There is a database that contains information on vendors, and so on and so on. So all of the information, or not all, but probably 80% of the information in an organization is sitting in some sort of a database. There are also applications which allow us to access the information in the database. So the front end to PeopleSoft, or the front end to Oracle Financials, or the screen that allows you to log into SAP and perform a task or run a report. All of this is an application connecting to a database at the backend. And the databases sometimes can serve a single application, or sometimes they can serve more than one application. So this is the environment. So we have risks here with the operating system, associated with the operating system, risks with the databases, risks with the applications. Of course, our servers are linked in some sort of a network, like here, looking at the arrow between the two. So that means that we also have network risks that we need to consider. And finally, we have the connection to the internet, where that introduces a whole new set of risks that we need to be mindful of. So these are some of the internal risks to look at. Now, some specifics for operating systems. There are risks in terms of how they are configured. There are risks in terms of what is their capacity, because if you have a hard drive with 500 gigabytes capacity and you're nearing the capacity, you are running the danger of the application dropping records or stopping to work or becoming very slow. You have life cycle risks because the information in that application needs to be handled in the way like over the life. So when you implement the application, it's the start, but when you dispose of the application, that information needs to be disposed of properly. Destroyed or moved somewhere, or whatever the case might be. Upgrades and patching. Are we patching because the dangers are always there from external parties and cyber criminals? Are we upgrading our environment? Most organizations do that, but still, as an auditor, it's good to keep an eye on what's happening, and actually it's best if it can be automated in some way. It can be, because we don't want our environment to be 3 versions behind the current environment for our operating system, because those old versions are actually susceptible to penetration attacks of various kinds. Are we backing up? Again, most organizations do it. The problem is we are backing up, but can we restore the backups, which is a totally different question, and most organizations haven't tested their backups. So they don't know the answer. They're basically hoping and crossing their fingers. Some other things in the internal risks, internal networks, so password sniffing. It's possible for somebody who is already part of the organization to install a little piece of software or device and actually start collecting the passwords that are traveling across the network internally. Elevated privileges. Basically, everybody needs to be able to access only the part of the network and the systems that they need for their work. That's usually not the case. There is a number of reasons for that. usually it's inefficient HR procedures when a person moves from one job to another job. In an ideal world, all of their privileges associated with the previous jobs will be removed, and the privileges associated with the new job will be assigned to them. That's usually not the case. The old ones are not removed, the new ones are assigned because they cannot do their job otherwise. And eventually, when you change 3 or 4 jobs over 5 years, your privileges went from here on a need to have basis to here because you've been to 3 or 4 different departments and you've kept accumulating privileges. And then, of course, that means that you can access things that you shouldn't be able to access. I'm not talking about malicious intent, although it is always potentially present there, but also simple mistakes can lead to disasters. And that leads to inappropriate access to corporate information. Not everyone should be able to see all of the documents of the network because they're documents which are highly sensitive versus documents which are available for the general population of employees. Not everybody should be able to look into various databases or into various applications and access the information there. Like, for example, not everybody should be able to print a report of the salaries in the organization. The payroll information is one of the most critical ones. But through the accumulated privileges, that's potentially possible. Then we have external threats and risks that we need to keep in mind. There is a number of those, but one which I would like to bring your attention to is the advanced persistent threats. So basically, when we talk about APT, these are very focused attacks which are just focused on one organization. This is not like cyber criminals sending a lot of spam emails and to thousands of people and hoping that somebody would click on that link. No, this is actually, we are going to target Bank B or Government Department A. We are going to take as much time as needed. So some of these things go for months, but eventually, slowly, we'll find the weakness in their system because we're focused. There are 2 or 3 people focused only on one thing on a daily basis, and we'll penetrate the systems. Organizations are aware of that. Not all audit departments are aware of these things, so it pays to talk to the network administrators or to the IT infrastructure teams and say, what are you currently doing in relation to the APTs? And the answer will give you an idea in terms of maturity and where your organization is. Another risk is social media. There are several aspects here. Reputation. So what does appear on the social media channels of the organization? That can actually impact the reputation. Now, anything that goes onto the official channels needs to be approved. Otherwise, information or views which shouldn't be there may appear and harm the reputation of the company. Potential security breaches where somebody can hack the account and actually start providing posts on social media which are contrary to what the organization does. Can be used for social engineering as well. So people will actually monitor very closely what's happening and using that info on the social media channels of the organization. Using that information, they can then try and gain the trust of somebody inside the organization, presenting themselves as employees from the marketing department, for example, and then get access to passwords and other things. Regulatory and compliance risks. Now, in most countries, the central bank as a regulator usually issues guidelines on what financial service organizations can put or cannot put. Same for the government departments. So somebody needs to monitor and somebody needs to be aware that actually there's a potential regulatory and compliance aspect to every single post that goes on the social media. Return on investment, if we are actually using paid social media, which both private and government organizations do, like for example here in Brisbane where I live, we just had some pretty heavy floods. over the last 3 days. My house actually got flooded 3 times. Unfortunately, we managed to clean it up, but it is a big problem for the city at the moment. Yesterday, probably half of the roads were closed and kids didn't go to school yesterday and today, simply because it's too dangerous to drive. So Brisbane City Council actually was providing paid social media campaigns to inform the citizens. Like I got on my mobile phone, I got 3 or 4 SMSs from Brisbane City Council. That costs money. So same for Facebook, same for Twitter. So if we engage in that, this is from the point of view of government, and commercial organizations do it for marketing purposes or to reach their customers and so on. What is our return on investment? If we spend $1,000, what did we get back for it? Did we get 2 posts on Facebook that reached 55 people, or did we get 2 posts on Facebook that reached 5,000 people? So all of these things, this is all that needs to be considered in social media. And also virus malware can also come through. Privacy is another risk, and right now the privacy legislation is getting stronger and stronger. Here's an example that's from 3 years ago. Google was fined $57 million in France. GDPR is the golden standard for privacy legislation, general data protection regulation. So this is what organizations need to keep in mind. They need to know, are they compliant with the specific privacy legislation? And what do they need to do? Especially for GDPR, which applies to European citizens, which is a European legislation and applies to European subjects. Now, the fact that you're not in Europe doesn't mean that your organization doesn't fall under it. As an example, here in Australia, there is a different legislation, but I am a European citizen as well as an Australian citizen. So actually my data is the data of a European data subject. So now that means that all of the organizations like Brisbane City Council and other organizations that have my data are potentially falling under GDPR. This is also the case for your organizations as well, and something that you need to keep in mind. Cloud, all right. We all thought that cloud is great. Yes, it is quite good actually, but there are issues with the cloud because actually you took all of the information that you have and the data, you took the hard disk out of your computer or out of your computers, many hard disks, and you gave them to someone to manage it on your behalf. This is what cloud is, as well as the process and everything else. Also, the question now becomes, how secure is that information in wherever it is, where it is managed, who else is sharing that infrastructure with you, and what are the potentials for hacks and so on. Where are the data centers where your information is stored? Usually you don't know. You go, Amazon doesn't guarantee where the information is. As an Australian or as a Malaysian company, it can tell you it's secured up to whatever level, but you cannot say the information is in KL or the information is in Sydney or the information is in Berlin. It's somewhere in the world. So doesn't matter how good the cloud provider is, which is another story altogether, you still have some risks which are associated with it. So these are some of the risks that are associated with clouds. Now, one of the things that personally I think is very important for organizations to consider, when you go to the cloud, you need to pay attention to the type of provider that you'll be using. All right, so there are tier 1, tier 2, tier X providers. Now, that company down the road on the street may be half the price of Google or Amazon, but honestly, I will not trust it. Simply because you don't know what their controls are, you don't know what their processes are, you don't know what their employees are. You can very unlikely that you'll be able to get some information from there. So actually, it's better to go with a tier 1 provider. This is not an advertisement for any of those, but at least you can get information. Sometimes if you are a big enough customer, they'll sit down with you and they will actually explain to you face to face what they're doing. Certainly that would apply in case of banks and government organizations. So all of these things are important to consider. Some of the other risks that, as you can see here, now, cloud computing, risk number one, due to the anonymous nature of some cloud services, they attract use by criminal elements. Yes, they do, simply because if you penetrate the defenses of a cloud provider, you get access not to one organization's data, you get access to multiple organizations' data. What's better? Efficiency in action for the hackers. They spent some effort and they got the result of getting actually multiple organizations' data. So these are things that we need to keep in mind. Another one, insecure interface and application and programming interfaces. The data that travels between your premises and the provider, whoever they are, what is the mechanism, how secure are the interfaces, what APIs are being used. Again, these are questions that need to be asked. Malicious insiders, number three, you don't know what is the supply chain of your cloud provider in most cases. What is their HR policy? What are their HR processes? What is their security management or incident management processes? All of these things are not very. For some providers, they are more than to actually consider. Now, with cybersecurity, I'd like to spend a little bit of time here on cyber, because remember the picture with the castle? Okay, this is your castle. You're inside the castle, the perimeter, this is your network, everything's perfect, okay? In most cases, your systems are quite well protected, in most cases. Nothing's perfect, but overall, I think that things are handled quite well here. But you have people who are actually connecting to your networks through laptops. Okay, your employees working from home, or even if they are not working, well, working from home may go away to some extent, but people now have the ability to connect to systems, and that has been made better and better as a result of COVID. Now people will keep connecting to the systems, maybe not on a daily basis, but maybe once every couple of weeks, if they remember that they need to do something at 10 o'clock in the evening from home. You also have people using mobile devices to connect, or whether it's phones or tablets, doesn't matter. But the point is that apart from the employees connecting, who else is using those? Are they sharing their laptops with their parents who don't have the same training and awareness of what's going on? Or are they sharing their tablets and mobile devices with their kids who are basically tapping on the keyboard and playing games and whatever? Has anybody trained the kids, told them what should be done and what shouldn't be done? Okay, my kids are a little bit paranoid, like, but it is because I work in this area, so I keep telling them, be careful, be careful, be careful, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But does everybody in your organization do that? Okay, how well are protected the devices which can now link to your network? This is not malicious use. This is basically normal use by people who don't have the same level of awareness. So this is a serious cybersecurity risk. This is actually the one of those that can be the easiest ones to address, because it can be done using training only, training sessions, 1 or 2 hours. So here's a quick poll just to get, now one of these, and just use the chat box again and type a number between 1 and 4. One of these is a real phishing email, which I have received. Can you guess which one? And I will give you 15 seconds for that. Because usually when we read an email, we spend 15-20 seconds on it, and that's it. So Okay, let's make it 20 seconds. Can you guess which one is the problematic one? Just type a number between 1 and 4. Okay, 30 seconds. Or a little bit. Anybody? Yes, you will get the slides. Okay. A few answers, a few more. We're well beyond the 30 seconds, but let's keep going for a little bit more. Actually, we'll keep going. Yep. Okay, Esther. Yes, it's actually number 2. This is something which I received, and there was a link for me to click in order for me to get to review the proposal. I'm thinking, no, I'm not doing that. But hackers are becoming better and better. So this is another thing that needs to be addressed, and this is purely training with employees, just to show them how to identify these things, and just to drive home the point that they need to be a little bit more careful. The problems with cybersecurity, apart from all of the corporate systems, the remaining problems can be addressed very easily through employee training. Employee training comes in for everybody in the organization. It's a short training, 1 hour, not just for the security people, because security people know these things. They do pay attention to them. It is the other people who don't pay as much attention. The engineer in the field or the girl at the front desk, they are the ones that need to be trained. Okay, so let's move on. Digital disruption, another one. Well, this one sums it pretty well, this cartoon here, because there are so many things that can go wrong. This is just in one presentation, but the same thing applies in business processes and in a number of other situations. So are you ready to meet about digital transformation? Top left. Yeah, we cannot see your slides and you're talking about digital transformation, right? Do you need to download the video plugin? Most people are, what is video plugin? We're restricted to Internet Explorer 7, okay. I tried to email the slide deck, but it bounced back. Of course, because our file limit is 1 megabyte. Dropbox or WeTransfer. Yeah, right. Okay, so Dropbox is a little bit more familiar. So this cartoon is a couple of years old, but I'm pretty sure pre-COVID, not many people were using Dropbox. Google Docs. Yeah, who's using Google Docs? All right, 10% of the population. The rest of it is on Microsoft Office. I'm not sure how to present to you the last picture. Can you fax it to us? Yeah, why not? I'm not sure who's used fax in the last 10 or 15 years. I don't even know where you can find one these days. And this sums up quite well what is happening here. New technologies and new ways of doing things constantly introduced into the organization, and people are getting confused. And this is not their fault. Actually, there is a number of factors, change management, training, which is part of change management in some cases, all of these things, improperly implemented processes. But these are the things that we need to keep in mind. So all of the new initiatives, from an internal audit perspective, from auditing perspective, both internal and external, the question is, okay, so what we are doing, how quickly are we doing it? Who knows about it? The people who are impacted by it, are they aware of what's happening? Are they aware how their jobs will change as a result of that, what they need to do? All of these are the questions that we need to keep in mind. So we'll be finishing shortly. Couple of things. So how do we, this is an audit program that I use in my teams for social media risks. Have a look first at the organizational chart so that we know who are talking and who is responsible somewhere in the organization for the social media, not just the immediate line manager. What is the scope of the audit? Are we looking at PR risk, public relations? Are we looking at operational effectiveness? The one where how much money did we spend and what did we get as a result of that? Who are the responsible managers? Talk to them. Are there any social media professionals? They don't need to be dedicated people, but whoever is handling social media need to talk to them. And it can be more than one person, because if we have several social media channels, there can be someone responsible for Facebook and Instagram, and there can be somebody responsible for LinkedIn and Twitter, as an example. What is our presence on different social media platforms? We need to be able to know that as an organization. Create a map. If it's not present, usually it's not present. That has been my experience. So people just know it in their heads. So it's not a bad idea actually to put it on a piece of paper. It doesn't need to be anything elaborate. What is the approval and publishing process? So when we go and talk to someone, who is approving what? How often does these things go out? Do we publish everything? Sorry, do we publish something on a daily basis? Do we publish something twice a week? Do we publish something on a weekly basis? It is probably different across the different social media platforms. Who is responsible to actually say, yes, this is okay? Because honestly, I've dealt with interns and with external parties on our social media channels, and I wouldn't let anything go out on social media unless actually I saw it. Yes, some interns are great, but I've seen some that actually almost made me cry. So we cannot really rely on that. What is the use of automated tools? Because you can actually use tools like Buffer or Hootsuite, and you can schedule campaigns and you may forget to stop them. And long after the date passed for whatever promotion or event you are running or wanting to make them aware, the paid campaigns are still running. So the floods in Brisbane are starting to subside. So probably today is Tuesday. I don't think that by Thursday, Brisbane City Council needs to do anything about the floods on social media, but somebody needs to stop the campaigns, because next week that would be a waste of money if Brisbane City Council is still telling us about the floods. There are no floods anymore. So all of these are considerations for review. And what are the monitoring processes? Does anybody within the team monitor this thing? If not, how often does audit monitor it? Or is there somebody else who needs to monitor it? Again, these are the questions which will come up in the review. So this is a high-level social media audit program, but just to give you an idea. Now quickly, I also want to show you a demo of a system which is used for fraud detection. As I said, some of you have seen it already. I'll just change my screen. All right. So here is a system that is designed to identify identity fraud based on social media presence of people, and also on the way they answer questionnaires. Okay. The way they answer questionnaires online. The system contains several modules. It analyzes Twitter, analyzes Facebook, analyzes text answers, and based on that provides a recommendation whether somebody should actually review. This is for online credit applications, whether somebody should review what's going on, or whether they can approve this one automatically. So I will run the analytics. So one of the things that the system does, it provides a set of tiles, either green or yellow, which are linked to each one of the analytics that you see here. And I will run, so the system's running, just excuse me. Okay, so here's the output from the analysis. So as you can see here, there are 5 tiles. 3 of them are green, so Facebook activity for this person is good. Facebook friends, okay. Their answer to a specific topic is not good, so needs to be reviewed. Twitter activity is pretty bad too, and Twitter followers are okay, so it's green. Twitter followers number, and like now maybe we need to. This is a review. This needs to go for review to a review by a human officer in a bank. So let's dig a little bit deeper and see what each one of these things shows. And these are the actual graphs that the system produced. Apologies for that. The various graphs that the system produced in relation to activities. So here's the Twitter activity, which I said was good. Twitter friends didn't appear, but sorry, this is Facebook activity here at the top, the dark blue. Facebook activity, lots of activity over different years, posts, and so on. So that was okay. But here is the Twitter activity of an account. There is only something that happened in 2020, and that's it. And it's not enough. This is my account. Well, this is a simulated account actually. But here's my real Twitter account. All of my friends on Twitter here in the bottom right corner. So all of my Twitter friends, as you can see, I have accumulated a lot of Twitter friends over years. All of the, if a year is red, that means that I didn't have enough that year. But 2007, I was starting on Twitter. It was all good. It was not good because first year, but after that, it's all good. All of the people there are, I'm accumulating a lot of friends. So it's unlikely that I'm a synthetic identity that can be used to perform synthetic identity fraud. But criminals are using social media for that purpose. And these are the things that we need to keep in mind. This is just a tool that shows how technology and some more advanced concepts like artificial intelligence and social media graph analytics can be employed, can be used to address the digital technology risks, the digital risks that we are currently facing, that our organizations are currently facing. So just a couple of words. Digital technology risks are here. They're not going to go away. They can be tackled from 2 different aspects. The first one is various types of automated tools and processes like the one that I showed you, but in your organizations, you're probably looking at various continuous monitoring, continuous auditing systems, or initiatives, and so on and so on. So just keep working on those because they will make life a lot easier. They don't need to be extremely complex, but they would allow us as auditors to keep a constant eye on what is happening in the organization, especially with the dynamic workforce, people working from home all the time, who is logging from where, are they changing their passwords on time, are these things being enforced, the password changes and so on. Technology and data analytics will help you greatly. The next aspect is training. As I said, training and awareness can significantly reduce the risks from human errors. And we cannot blame the employees. That's absolutely wrong, in my opinion, because unless people are trained and they know what they are doing, we cannot ask them, why didn't you do this, or why did you do that, and why didn't you select the proper password? Because most people don't have an idea what is a proper password. No wonder the top password in the top most popular password in the world is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Second most popular is the word password. if you do a Google search on top 10 most popular passwords, you will see the stats for 2021. That's from 2022, sorry. That's from last year. People don't know how to select proper passwords. Most of us don't. So we need to train them. We need to bring to their awareness that they are part of this ecosystem and they are responsible for reducing digital risk. So automation and technology, together with training, will fix the problem at an organizational level. And these are some of the things that we discussed here that you need to pay attention to as auditors. So any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box, or you can unmute your mics and speak them. Just while we're waiting for the questions, just some information for you. Most of you have come to the session by registering on our LinkedIn page, MBS Academy. You know that we provide we provide digital technology training. Now, yes, you will have, everybody will receive the slides. But I want to mention something else, specifically for the people who are in Malaysia. MBS Academy has got a Malaysian subsidiary called MBS Academy Malaysia. And the Malaysian subsidiary is registered with HRD Corporation. So you actually coming to our training, you can claim credits from the government. So your organization, most likely, if you work in a large organization, contributes to the HRD Corp fund and has got training credits. So speak to your HR people, speak to your managers, because any training that you attend with us, Malaysian organizations only, you can actually get the credits back. So the training will be free because the organization has already submitted. Has already paid the fee for the fund. For this one, you will receive an attendance certificate. Yes, you will receive a link to the recording for the session. So if there are no questions, it was great to have you here. We're having another session in 2 weeks' time on data analytics in audit. There will be information about it on our LinkedIn page. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and I look forward hopefully to see some of you in KL soon. I'm really missing KL. I've been there for 3 years. It would be good, actually, once we start traveling. Bye now.